Imagine being locked in a tiny room, no windows, no conversations, no human touch, just you, four walls, and silence that feels heavier with every passing hour. This is solitary confinement, often called a prison within a prison. While it might sound like just another form of punishment, the reality is far darker. Isolation slowly breaks down the human mind and body in terrifying ways. From hallucinations and rage to irreversible psychological scars, solitary confinement has been described by many experts as a form of slow torture. Today, we'll count down 9 disturbing things that actually happen when someone is left completely alone in the dark. Number 9. Sensory deprivation. One of the first things solitary confinement strips away is your connection to the outside world. No sunlight, no natural sounds, and nothing stimulating to look at. It's like being trapped in a void. Human brains are wired to process constant input from our surroundings. When that input disappears, the mind doesn't simply rest. Instead, it begins to break down. Prisoners often report seeing flashes of light in total darkness or hearing whispers when no one is there. Some describe the sensation of a presence in the room, as if an invisible figure is standing over them. These aren't supernatural events, they're the brain desperately creating stimulation to fill the silence. Scientists call this perceptual deprivation, and even short-term studies show it can cause hallucinations within just a few days. In solitary confinement, inmates may experience these distortions for weeks, months, or even years. The result is a terrifying blurring of reality, not knowing what's real and what's only a creation of the mind. What begins as silence and emptiness quickly turns into a haunted space inside one's own head. And that's just the first step in the mental unraveling that solitary confinement inflicts. Number 8. Mental breakdown. After just a few weeks in solitary, the silence and emptiness begin to erode a prisoner's sense of self. Depression creeps in, followed by crushing anxiety. With no human contact, no meaningful activity, and no control over their environment, many inmates describe the experience as being buried alive. Clinical studies show that prolonged isolation can trigger severe mood disorders, feelings of hopelessness, uncontrollable crying, and in some cases, complete emotional collapse. Some prisoners stop eating, others refuse to speak, while many report an overwhelming sense of panic that strikes without warning. Psychologists often compare solitary confinement to a form of psychological torture. Unlike physical wounds, the damage here is invisible but long-lasting. Former inmates describe emerging from isolation feeling broken, unable to interact normally, or struggling with suicidal thoughts long after their release. What makes this so disturbing is that the breakdown isn't caused by violence or chains, it's caused by silence, stillness, and absence. Solitary confinement turns the human mind against itself, making suffering unavoidable even in the quietest of rooms. This descent into depression and anxiety is only the beginning, because as the weeks stretch into months, the brain begins to lose something even more fundamental: its grip on reality. Number 7. Aggression and rage. For some prisoners, isolation doesn't lead to quiet despair, it explodes into uncontrollable anger, cut off from any outlet. Emotions build like pressure inside a sealed container. The smallest irritation, like the sound of footsteps in the hallway, can spark violent outbursts. Inmates often report pounding on the walls, shouting until their voices crack, or destroying whatever little they have in their cell. Psychologists call this phenomenon anger loops. With no one to talk to and no healthy way to release frustration, the mind replays the same triggers over and over, amplifying rage each time. This cycle can turn otherwise calm individuals into highly aggressive ones. Some become a danger to themselves, smashing their fists against the concrete until they bleed. Others lash out at guards during the rare interactions they have. In extreme cases, rage spirals so intensely that prisoners lose all sense of control, experiencing blackout fits of violence. The cruel paradox is that solitary confinement is often used to manage dangerous inmates, yet the isolation itself can manufacture aggression that wasn't there before. Instead of calming behavior, it fuels volatility, trapping prisoners in an endless feedback loop of fury. And when anger becomes the only emotion that breaks through the silence, it pushes the mind further toward collapse. Number 6. Cognitive decline. When the mind is left unstimulated for too long, it doesn't just get restless, it starts to deteriorate. One of the most well-documented effects of solitary confinement is cognitive decline. Prisoners often describe it as their thoughts slowing down, like trying to wade through mental quicksand. Short-term memory is one of the first casualties. Inmates forget simple details, like what day it is or what they were just thinking a few minutes ago. Concentration becomes nearly impossible. Reading a page of text or writing a coherent letter can take hours because the mind keeps drifting or shutting down. Over time, even basic communication suffers. Former prisoners report struggling to hold conversations, searching for words, or losing track of what they were saying mid-sentence. Psychologists explain that the brain is like a muscle. It needs exercise. Without social interaction, varied environments, and regular challenges, neural pathways weaken. Long-term solitary confinement has been shown to reduce activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making, focus, and impulse control. In extreme cases, this decline resembles the cognitive aging process, but sped up dramatically. What's especially disturbing is how lasting these effects can be. Even after leaving solitary, some individuals never fully recover their ability to concentrate, study, or interact socially. It's as if a part of their mental machinery has rusted beyond repair. So while solitary confinement doesn't leave visible scars, it can permanently dull the very essence of what makes us human, the ability to think clearly, remember, and communicate with others. Number 5. Physical health issues. Solitary confinement doesn't just erode the mind, it also takes a heavy toll on the body. Locked in a small cell for 22 to 24 hours a day, prisoners are cut off from the most basic elements of physical health: sunlight, movement, and fresh air. The lack of natural light quickly leads to vitamin D deficiency, which weakens bones and increases the risk of fractures. Some inmates develop early signs of osteoporosis, while others complain of chronic muscle pain simply from inactivity. With no regular exercise, muscles waste away, joints stiffen, and overall strength declines. The cardiovascular system also suffers. Without movement to keep the heart strong, inmates in solitary show higher risks of hypertension and heart disease. The immune system weakens as well, making them more vulnerable to infections and illnesses that would normally be easy to resist. Even the skin and eyes are affected. Prisoners deprived of sunlight often develop pallor and vision problems, particularly when the only light source is a flickering fluorescent bulb. Combined with poor prison diets, the physical decline becomes even more pronounced. What's striking is how preventable these issues are, yet solitary confinement deliberately removes the very conditions needed to sustain health. Over months and years, the body begins to mirror the confinement of the cell, rigid, fragile, and breaking down under pressure. It's a grim reminder that human beings are not built for stillness and darkness. Deprive the body of its natural rhythms, and it deteriorates just as surely as the mind. Number 4. Sleep disorders. One of the cruelest effects of solitary confinement is the collapse of normal sleep. In a cell with no natural sunlight and only artificial light, the body's circadian rhythm, the internal clock that tells us when to sleep and wake, falls apart. Without a clear sense of day or night, many prisoners develop chronic insomnia. Some inmates report staying awake for days at a time, only to collapse into restless sleep filled with vivid, repetitive nightmares. Others wake up constantly, unable to reach the deep, restorative stages of rest over weeks and months. This fragmented sleep erodes both physical and mental health. Exhaustion sets in, memory worsens, and emotional control weakens even further. Nightmares themselves often mirror the trauma of confinement. Former prisoners describe dreams of being trapped, chased, or suffocated only to wake up and find that reality is just as suffocating. The line between nightmare and waking life blurs, turning every night into another layer of torment. Studies confirm that sleep deprivation amplifies nearly all the other harms of solitary paranoia, depression, aggression, and cognitive decline. In short, Poor sleep doesn't just make confinement harder, it accelerates the spiral into mental and physical breakdown. For most of us, sleep is a refuge, but in solitary confinement, even that final escape is stolen, leaving inmates trapped in a cycle of exhaustion and terror that never truly ends. Number 3. Loss of identity. Perhaps the most disturbing consequence of solitary confinement isn't just physical or mental decline, it's the slow erosion of identity itself. Humans are social creatures, and much of who we are is defined by our interactions with others. When a prisoner is cut off from all meaningful contact, no conversation, no touch, no acknowledgement, the sense of self begins to unravel. Inmates often describe the experience as becoming invisible. Days blur together, with no external validation that they even exist. Psychologists call this civil death. You're alive, breathing, but stripped of your role in society. You're no longer a father, a friend, a worker, you're just a number locked in a cell. Over time, some prisoners lose the ability to picture themselves in the outside world. Memories of family fade. The idea of being part of a community feels foreign. This disconnection fuels hopelessness because identity is more than a name, it's the anchor that ties a person to meaning and purpose. There are accounts of inmates who stopped speaking altogether, convinced their words no longer mattered. Others stared into mirrors, unable to recognize the person looking back. Solitary doesn't just punish behavior, it dismantles the very framework of self. Losing one's identity in this way is devastating because it makes reintegration into society almost impossible. Even after release, many struggle to feel human again. Solitary doesn't just confine the body, it erases the person inside it. Number 2. Suicidal tendencies. If solitary confinement erodes the body and the mind, it also attacks the will to live. Across multiple studies, inmates held in isolation are several times more likely to attempt suicide than those in the general prison population. Even brief stints in solitary can trigger despair, but for prisoners kept there for months or years, it's like serving a slow death sentence. Isolation intensifies every negative feeling, fear, guilt, rage, and loneliness while stripping away all support systems. There's no conversation, no eye contact, no sense of time passing. For someone already vulnerable, that emptiness becomes unbearable. Prison psychologists describe it as living in an emotional vacuum where hope simply evaporates. Letters and testimonies from former inmates show the same pattern. Thoughts of self-harm creep in quietly, then take over. Some bang their heads against walls, cut themselves, or refuse food. Others make lethal attempts because death feels like the only escape from the constant sensory and emotional deprivation. What makes this especially grim is that solitary cells are often meant to be secure and monitored, yet suicides still occur at alarming rates. In some prisons, more than half of inmate suicides happen inside isolation units, even though those units hold only a fraction of the population. This isn't just a statistic, it's a warning about how deep the psychological damage runs. Solitary confinement doesn't just confine a person physically, it can push them to the edge, turning a prison sentence into something that feels like a living execution. Number 1. Permanent psychological damage. The most chilling reality of solitary confinement is that the damage doesn't end when the cell door finally opens. Many inmates carry the scars for life. Extended isolation rewires the brain, leaving behind post-traumatic stress disorder, severe anxiety, and even psychosis. Former prisoners describe constant flashbacks, panic attacks in crowded spaces, and the feeling that they're always being watched even long after release. Some develop full-blown hallucinations or paranoia that never fades. Others lose the ability to hold conversations, trust people, or maintain relationships. Reintegration into society becomes nearly impossible when the basic skills of social interaction have been eroded by years of silence. Researchers have found that time in solitary can permanently impair memory and attention, creating long-term cognitive disabilities. For some, the world outside feels overwhelming, a rush of noise, light, and choices that their brains can no longer process. Instead of freedom feeling like liberation, it becomes another kind of prison. The lasting damage doesn't just affect the individual. families struggle to reconnect with loved ones who return withdrawn, volatile, or emotionally detached. Communities inherit people who have been broken down rather than rehabilitated. In that sense, solitary confinement punishes far beyond the walls of a prison. When critics call solitary a sentence that never ends, this is what they mean. The punishment follows inmates into every day of their future lives, a reminder that shutting a person away in darkness can leave wounds deeper than any physical chain. Solitary confinement is not just punishment, it is a slow erosion of the human spirit. Behind the silence and steel doors lies a reality that leaves scars far deeper than chains ever could. That's why many human rights experts are calling for its abolition, or at least strict limits on its use. If this glimpse into the hidden costs of isolation struck you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more dark insights into prisons and the human mind.